In 1994, a Kurdish shepherd was walking through the hills of southern Turkey when he noticed something strange sticking out of the ground. He reported it to a local museum. Archaeologists came. They dug. And what they found sitting beneath the soil, perfectly preserved, perfectly hidden, was so old, so sophisticated, and so completely impossible according to everything we thought we knew about human history, that when the lead archaeologist first laid eyes on it, he said, "In 10 years, Gobekli Tepe has changed our ideas about the beginning of human history." He was being modest. This site did not just change our ideas, it demolished them. And here is what I want you to understand before we go any further. What you are about to learn in the next 15 minutes is not fringe theory. It is not a conspiracy. It is not ancient aliens. It is peer-reviewed, universally accepted archaeology, published in the world's leading scientific journals, taught at top universities around the world. This is the official record, and it is more astonishing than any conspiracy ever dreamed up. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will never look at the story of humanity the same way again. The site is called Gobekli Tepe. In Turkish, that means Potbelly Hill. It sits in the Taurus Mountains of southeastern Turkey, not far from the Syrian border, and for 10,000 years it sat there quietly under the ground, completely unknown to the modern world. What the archaeologists found, and what they are still finding, because they have only excavated about 5% of the site, are massive T-shaped limestone pillars, arranged in circular enclosures, carved with intricate reliefs of animals. Foxes, boars, cranes, vultures, lions, scorpions, the detail is astonishing. These are not stick figures. These are anatomically precise, beautifully rendered carvings by hands that knew exactly what they were doing. Some of the pillars are 6 meters tall. That is nearly 20 feet. They weigh between 10 and 20 tons each. And they were cut, moved, and raised by people who had no metal tools, no wheels, no domesticated animals to help carry the load, no written language, no agriculture. Now here is the number that changes everything. Gobekli Tepe has been dated to approximately 9,600 BC. That is 11,600 years ago. The pyramids at Giza were built around 2,500 BC, roughly 4,500 years ago. That means Gobekli Tepe is not just old. It is older than the pyramids by more than 7,000 years. It predates Stonehenge by over 7,000 years as well. It was already ancient, already buried and forgotten beneath the earth, when the Egyptians laid the first stone of the Great Pyramid. Let that sit with you for a moment. The most sophisticated construction project we know of from this period of human history was built by people we were taught had barely figured out how to eat. Let me take you back to the version of history most of us learned in school. The story goes like this. For most of human prehistory, our ancestors were primitive nomadic hunter-gatherers. They roamed the land in small bands, living hand-to-mouth, with no real social structure, no organized religion, no monumental ambitions. Then around 10,000 BC something changed. People figured out agriculture. They learned to plant crops and herd animals. This allowed them to settle down, build permanent villages, accumulate food surpluses, and eventually develop the complex social structures, hierarchies, specialized labor, organized religion that made civilization possible. First farming, then settlement, then complexity, in that order, always in that order. That was the model, that was the timeline. That was what generations of students, scholars, and textbooks accepted as established fact. Gobekli Tepe did not modify that model, it reversed it. Because here is what the evidence actually shows. The people who built it were not farmers. The site predates agriculture by at least 1,000 years, and some researchers believe by considerably more. There is no evidence of cultivation, no evidence of permanent settlement, no granaries, no domesticated crops in the soil layers beneath the oldest structures. The people who quarried those massive pillars, who carved those animals with such astonishing skill, who organized the labor required to raise 20-ton stones into precise circular formations, those people were hunter-gatherers. Which means we had the sequence completely backwards. It was not that farming created the social complexity needed to build temples. It appears that building temples, that the drive toward ritual, toward meaning, toward something larger than daily survival, may have actually preceded farming, may have driven it. The need to gather, to feed large groups of workers, to return again and again to a sacred place, that need may have been what pushed our ancestors toward growing food in the first place. Religion did not come after civilization. According to Gobekli Tepe, religion may have come first. Now I want to tell you the part of this story that most videos leave out, because for me, this is the detail that makes everything more mysterious. Around 8,000 BC, roughly 1,600 years after the earliest structures at Gobekli Tepe were built, something happened. The site was deliberately and carefully filled in. The enclosures were buried under tons of rubble, animal bones, and stone debris. The pillars were covered over. The entire complex was sealed beneath the earth. And then, as far as we can tell, it was abandoned. Nobody was forced to do this. This was not destruction. This was preservation. Whoever buried Gobekli Tepe took deliberate care to fill it in without damaging the structures inside. The burial is what protected the pillars from 12,000 years of erosion, weather, and human interference. Without it, we would have found nothing, just a windswept hill. So the question is, why? Why would a community invest the enormous labor required to bury a site of this significance? Were they sealing something sacred? Were they protecting it for the future, for people they would never meet? Were they responding to some catastrophe we do not know about? Was this a ritual ending, a ceremonial closing of a chapter? We do not know, and that not knowing is the most important part, because it tells us something profound about the people who built this place. They thought about the future. They made deliberate choices about what to preserve and what to leave behind. They had a relationship with time itself, with memory and legacy, that we had assumed was far beyond them. These were not simple people reacting to their environment. These were people thinking about history, their history, and possibly ours. Here is another thing you probably have not heard. Gobekli Tepe is not alone. In the same region of southeastern Turkey, within a radius of about 200 kilometers, archaeologists have now identified at least 12 sites from roughly the same period with similar characteristics. Sites called Karahan Tepe, Harbitsuvan, Tasli Tepe, and others, collectively now referred to by the Turkish government and international archaeologists as the TARS Tepeler project, which translates as stone hills. Some of these sites are in certain ways even more remarkable than Gobekli Tepe itself. At Karahan Tepe, excavations have revealed pillars with human faces carved at the top, haunting, staring figures emerging from stone. There is a chamber there where a single pillar rises from the bedrock with a realistically carved human head, and the walls around it are lined with detailed carvings. This was clearly a place of profound ritual significance, built with enormous skill and intention. What this means is that Gobekli Tepe was not an accident. It was not one lucky community that somehow stumbled into building a temple. This entire region, 12,000 years ago, was home to a culture, possibly many interconnected cultures, with shared beliefs, shared symbolism, shared architectural traditions, and the organized social capacity to undertake massive construction projects across generations. A civilization, in every meaningful sense of the word, except the ones we used to require for the label. I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with the question before you reach for an answer. If hunter-gatherers 12,000 years ago could do all of this, the engineering, the art, the organization, the philosophy, then what were humans capable of 50,000 years ago, or 100,000 years ago? Modern humans, anatomically identical to you and me, have existed for at least 300,000 years. Our brain size, our cognitive capacity, our potential for language and symbolic thought, all of it has been in place for the vast majority of that time. The genetic hardware has not changed. What changed was the record. We tend to assume that because we have not found evidence of complex civilization before a certain point, it did not exist. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when you consider how thin and fragile the archaeological record really is. Most organic material decays within centuries. Most coastlines where early humans concentrated are now beneath the ocean, flooded by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age roughly 12,000 years ago. Most of the Earth has never been excavated at all. We are not reading the full book. We are reading pages that survived a house fire. Gobekli Tepe is one of those pages, and it tells us the book was far richer than we ever imagined. What if there were cultures, perhaps many of them, that rose and fell before the record we can access? What if the cycle of human complexity has collapsed and restarted more than once across deep time, leaving little more than stone behind, and sometimes not even that? Gobekli Tepe does not answer that question, but it forces us to ask it seriously, in a way that was not possible before 1994. I want to be very direct with you here, because I think this matters beyond the archaeology. The story we were told about human history, the story of a slow, straight, upward climb from primitive to modern, was always more comforting than it was accurate. It made us feel special. It made the present feel like the destination, the obvious end point of everything that came before. Gobekli Tepe suggests a different kind of story, one where human potential is not something we slowly developed over time, but something we have always had, lying dormant or active in different ways across thousands of generations, waiting for the right conditions, the right belief, the right question, to express itself in stone. The people who carved those animals and raised those pillars were not less than us. They were us. They looked up at the same night sky. They buried their dead and mourned them. They felt the need to build something larger than their own survival. They asked the questions that all humans eventually ask. Why are we here? What does this mean? What do we owe each other? And they answered those questions in stone. We found that stone. 12,000 years later, we dug it up. And if you pay attention to what it says, it tells you something important. The capacity for greatness is not new. It has always been there. What changes is whether we choose to act on it. Gobekli Tepe is still being excavated. New discoveries are being made every single season. Sites nearby are being uncovered that may be even older. We are right now in the middle of one of the most significant revisions of human prehistory in the history of archaeology, and most people have absolutely no idea it is happening. If this video changed how you see the story of humanity, if it made you question even one thing you were confidently told about where we come from and what we are capable of, then please share it, because this is the kind of knowledge that deserves to spread. Leave me a comment below. Tell me which part hit you hardest. Was it the dating, the deliberate burial, the network of sites, the question of what came before? I read every single comment, and your responses shape what I make next. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to understand not just Gobekli Tepe, but the full emerging picture of prehistoric civilization, the sites being found underwater, the evidence of advanced astronomical knowledge in ancient cultures, the mystery of why so many civilizations seem to appear suddenly and fully formed, then subscribe and hit the bell, because this is only the beginning. We have barely started digging.